Order. Urgent question, Mr. Andy Burnham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Health if he will make a statement on the success regime.
Where is he?
I call the Minister. Mr. Benedict Gummer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the success regime, details of which were published by Monitor yesterday. The purpose of the success regime is to improve health and care services for patients in local health and care systems that are struggling with financial and quality problems. It will build on the improvements made through the special measures regime, recognising that some of the underlying reasons may be caused by intrinsic structural problems in the local health economy. This will therefore make sure issues are addressed in the region, not just in one organisation. The regime is designed to make improvements happen in some of the most challenged health and care economies. The first sites to enter the regime, North Cumbria, Essex and North East and West Devon, are facing some of the most significant challenges in England. They have been selected based on data such as quality metrics, financial performance and other qualitative information. Unlike previous interventions, this will look at the whole health and care economy. Providers such as hospital trusts, service commissioners, CCGs and local authorities will be central to these discussions. It will be supported by 3 national NHS bodies, whereas existing interventions tend to be delivered by individual organisations and concentrate on one part of a health economy. For example, the Commissioning Assurance Framework led by NHS England, concentrating solely on commissioners, or special measures led by NHS, TDA or Monitor, which focuses on providers. Together, Monitor, TDA and NHS England, with local commissioners, patients, their representatives such as Healthwatch and Health and Wellbeing boards will aim to address systemic issues. The national bodies will provide support all the way through to implementation, with a focus on supporting and developing local leadership through the process.
Mr. Andy Burnham.
Mr. Speaker, as we've just heard, this is an announcement with far-reaching implications for people in Essex, Cumbria and Devon. It was being finalised on Tuesday when this House was engaged in a full day's debate on the National Health Service, and yet there was not one single mention of it in the course of that debate. What are we to make of that, Mr. Speaker? And why is the Secretary of State not here to give this announcement to this House? Why does he think it is always more important to make announcements in TV studios or to outside conferences than it is to members in this House? It is not acceptable. People in Cumbria, Essex and Devon will be worried about what the Minister has just said and what this means for health services in their area. First things first, can the Minister confirm that services in these areas are safe and sustainable? Do they have enough staff? And will immediate work be undertaken to deal with staff shortages? Are plans being drawn up to close A&E departments or other services as part of this process? Could it mean mergers of organisations and job losses? While we welcome action to take a broader view across challenged health economies, as indeed my honourable friend the member for Copeland has long called for, what will this new regime mean for local NHS bodies? Will they be able to be overruled by NHS England? The House will recall, Mr. Speaker, the last time the Secretary of State tried to take sweeping powers to close health services over the heads of local people in South London. It didn't end well. In fact, it ended up with him being defeated in the High Court. So can the Minister give us an assurance that there will be consultation with patients before any changes go ahead? And finally, isn't the fact that drastic powers are being taken by NHS England over whole swathes of the NHS in 3 counties, isn't that a sign of the failure of this government's plans for local commissioning and evidence of 5 years of failure of Tory health policies, that care failures are now more likely, not less likely, on their watch? Mr. Speaker, this is no way to run a health service and no way to treat Parliament. He is trying to shift the blame, as is the Secretary of State, for things going wrong in the NHS on their watch. Problems of their making. We won't let the Secretary of State do it. He should have been here and given members affected the courtesy of answers, and I would ask his junior minister to relay that concern directly to him after this debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Shadow Secretary of State has spoken at length in his answer to his urgent question about NHS bodies. He's spoken about local commissioners. He has spoken about NHS England. He has spoken about the Department of Health. But honourable members will notice that he missed out one group of people that he did not speak about, and that is patients. It is absolutely extraordinary that once again we have the Shadow Secretary of State coming here speaking again and again and again about structures, about the NHS and its bodies, about jobs, about providers, about deliverers, but not about the people who are being failed at a local level, and that is patients in Essex, West and North East Devon and in North Cumbria. So let me go through in detail about the points that the Shadow Secretary of State said. First of all, he made accusations about TV studios. I do think it's a bit of a cheek, frankly, to be making claims about that when the Secretary of State is, and I should say he's addressing very shortly the NHS Confederation. When an urgent question came in this morning, but to come from a Shadow Secretary of State who one might suspect is using, as he has always done, urgent questions and the issue of the NHS not to address issues of patient quality in these areas, but for his own political reasons. And it is a shameless attack, which I do think reflects rather badly on himself and not on the cause that he should seek to pursue, which is the better care of patients. And that lies right at the heart of what NHS England is attempting to do. Because in their plan, which they announced yesterday at the NHS Confederation, if he had read the comments by Simon Stevens, he will have noted that these plans are being drawn up, coordinated and in part led by local commissioners, not as it was before, by monolithic, centralised bodies headed not by clinicians or bureaucrats, but by clinicians locally supported and helped by NHS England and professional regulators. He asked about staff shortages. Again, a surprise that he would bring that forward to the House when he was the author, in part, of the staff shortages which hobbled the NHS in so much of the end of the previous Labour administration, which led to the problems in mid-Staffordshire, in part, which we have been seeking to address, and which only this government has promised in its previous incarnation and now to correct, in part by our pledges on GP numbers over the next 5 years. He asked about plans around A&E departments and about job losses. I will say to the honourable gentleman, it is different this time. These are plans which are being drawn up by local commissioners, and they are beginning the process now to work out how better to improve their local health economy. This is not a plan devised centrally in Whitehall which is going to be imposed on local areas, which would then be announced as a done deal to local people. I know that is what he is used to, but in this instance, it is a genuine conversation between local patients, local commissioners, to improve their local health economies, which will be supported by national bodies. He asks about South London and about consultation. I will say that I was a candidate in a constituency which had an imposed solution under the previous tenure of the Minister of the Shadow Secretary of State when he was Minister for Health, without any decent consultation, a proposal which in the end was thrown out because the previous government, when he was in control, never ever consulted properly with local people, and that is something that we have changed. And that is why these local plans will involve right from the outset local people, patient bodies, health and well-being boards. And finally, he asks about the powers of NHS England and about localisation and the coordination of local services. And that is why I ask him once again to go back and to read the speech by Simon Stevens. And he will see again why things have changed. This is not about decisions being made in Whitehall by politicians, and I dare to say the right honourable gentleman does not know the solution to the local health economy problems in Devon, in Essex and Cumbria. I tell you the people who do know. Well, I'm so glad that the Shadow Minister is such an augury of knowledge. I will tell him, the people who know, that it is the patients and the local clinicians, and they are the people who will be providing the answers. They will be the people making the changes. Because in the end, on this side of the House, what we want to see is patient care improved for local people. So we have excellence in the local NHS, excellence delivered, excellence for patients, and that is why we were supported in that mission at the last general election in creating a world-class NHS.
Order. I understand the high-spirited atmosphere in the chamber and the very great interest in this subject. Can I just remind members that brief questions and brief answers should be on the subject matter of the urgent question, which is the success regime. It is with that matter that we are this morning dealing. Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Speaker, I welcome the additional support for struggling health economies, even if this is a classic example of NHS Newspeak calling it a success regime. But would the Minister reassure the House that in looking at a wider approach to the health economy, that it will also look at the funding formula for both health and social care, which don't take take into consideration adequately the impact of both age and rurality in those funding formulas?
I thank my honourable friend who's given a typically gracious welcome to this, and she understands why this requires a whole system approach at a local level. And I can confirm to her that NHS will be studying every single aspect of the local health economy and what that entails.
Mr. Ben Bradshaw.
Is it not disgraceful, Mr. Speaker, that 2 days ago we had a health debate on the gracious speech when the Secretary of State had nothing to say about the financial crisis affecting the NHS and refused to even answer my questions about what he planned for Devon? And yesterday we have this announcement to the media with no detail about how it's going to affect patient care or the quality of services in my area. He's very keen on quoting Simon Stevens. Simon Stevens told BBC Radio Devon this morning that this chaos is a direct result of the fragmentation of this government's reorganisation of the health service. So when is he going to admit that that reorganisation was a disaster, and when are they going to get a grip on the spiralling financial crisis affecting our NHS?
I thank the right honourable gentleman, and I heard his comments during the Queen's speech, and I know that he's taken a keen and detailed interest in the problems in his local health economy. And I know also that he's been very careful and keen to include local commissioners and those who actually understand what's going on the ground. And that's why I had hoped that he would be pleased about the introduction of a success regime, which will build on the financial consultations and discussions that have been going on, which will involve local commissioners, and the important thing will actually provide the backup of national regulators and NHS England. And as to his final comments, I didn't hear the comments of Simon Stevens on local radio, but I did read his speech where he made the opposite point to the one that the right honourable gentleman suggested. And I will say also that the reforms that were brought in, far from how he characterised them, have saved £1.5 billion in this year, in addition to the £5 billion previously, money that's being invested in care in his constituency.
Simon Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for this statement. Could he tell me, though, how will my constituents in Mid-Essex and the local health economy in Mid-Essex see the results of what is going to be done under this regime? And could he give me an assurance that it will examine the funding formula per head of the population in Mid-Essex for healthcare, because it has been historically skewered away from Mid-Essex towards other parts of the country?
My right honourable friend will be aware of the hospitals in Essex which have been placed into special measures. And he will also be aware that just focusing in that instance on one particular or several particular institutions is not sufficient to sort out the problems in the wider local health economy. And that is why the success regime is being brought in, to try and deal with those systemic issues. And so I would hope that his constituents would rapidly see, after the success regime has been concluded, an improvement in the service that they receive and that they deserve wherever they are in the county. As to his second point about funding per head, he will know that NHS England has already started to look at this and in some instances address it. I have the same problem in my constituency in Suffolk, and it's something that certainly needs sorting out in the medium term across the country.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
The Minister talks about consulting locally with commissioning groups, but I'd like to ask, why is it that he's not willing to listen to groups of doctors across the country who talk about the point I made on Tuesday, which is fragmentation? We need integration. Local authorities are having their budget taken away, which means cuts to social care. Social care companies are one thread away from bankruptcy. We need to fund both sides of that, and we're running around looking at structure. We need to move and look at outcomes. In Scotland, we talk here, and I've heard about talking about 5-year forward. In Scotland, we're already doing that from Vision 2020. Look at the patients, as the Minister says.
I thank the Honourable Lady. May I take this opportunity to congratulate her on her maiden speech and her entry into the House, which I enjoyed listening to in the Queen's Speech debate. In response to her question, in England, we are addressing the issues around social care and its integration with the health service. That's why we've introduced the £5 billion Better Care Fund. And indeed, in these succession regimes, far from looking at structure, what we're actually trying to do is to see how we can better link up services. And that is why local councils will be a key partner at the table in these discussions.
Mr. John Stevenson.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the announcement, as I see it as a real opportunity to review the whole of the health economy in North Cumbria. I think it is a chance to review the strengths and the weaknesses of health care and patient care in and around Carlisle and North Cumbria. However, would the Minister confirm that this will not hinder other developments, such as the acquisition of the Cumberland Infirmary by Northumbria Trust?
I thank my honourable friend. It's such a pleasure to see him return to the House, and I know that he has been a tireless campaigner for the people of Carlisle. What I can say to him is that the success regime, as I have given in answer to previous questions, will look at every single part of the local health economy, and every single partner in those discussions will be either locally based or national regulators in NHS England.
Sue Hayman.
Mr. Speaker, I'm desperately concerned about the state of the health services we have in Western North Cumbria at the moment, as are many of my constituents. And what was raised with me during the election from many people is they want their services delivered as close to where they live, as close to home as is possible. That is challenging in West Cumbria. I hope that the success regime recognises that, and that we stop talking and consulting and actually have action to deliver the services where people live. This is challenging because of recruitment. Recruitment issues need to be taken into account, and I would like your assurance that that will be part of the success regime, because without it there will be no success.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady, the member for Workington, and welcome her to her seat. She is right in much of what she says, and the entire purpose of the success regime is to take action rather than just to keep on publishing PowerPoint presentations. So we will be addressing every single part of the failures in her local health economies, and that may well include recruitment.
Sir Alan Haselhurst.
If a major feature of the success regime is to tackle the question of ensuring that there is adequate care in the community so that people who no longer need to be in acute beds can be released safely and comfortably and to the assurance of their relatives and family, then isn't that something to be welcomed?
I thank my right honourable friend, and he has got to the nub of the point in the way that the Shadow Secretary of State did not, because this is actually about patient care and the excellence that we expect in patient care. And that is precisely why I agree with him that success regimes will only be successful if we ensure that we are improving patient care, and that might well include improving the access to care at a local level.
Heidi Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm confused. The NHS success regime is not about success, it's about failure. Can the Minister confirm that services in the areas affected are delivering safe care? Should patients be worried?
The Honourable Lady should not be confused, because it is indeed dealing with local failure, and we intend to turn it into a success. That is the point of what we are doing. And I should say to her, we have made these decisions where NHS have assessed those areas where there are quality and financial problems. We intend to address them rather than just talking about them, and that is why I'm so glad it will be locally led, finding local solutions to local problems.
Mr. Gary Streeter.
Mr. Speaker, this intervention affect every single one of my constituents, and if it improves their patient care, then of course I welcome it. But can my honourable friend, the Minister, who's done extremely well, if I may say so, from the dispatch box in one of his earliest outings, can he tell us what the timescale of this intervention is, and how will we specifically measure at the end of it whether or not it has been a success?
Well, my honourable friend, and thank him for his kind comments, should be aware that success regimes will begin imminently, but we have no set timescale yet for them, because that will be determined by the plan drawn up in the initial stages by local commissioners. And again, that goes to the root of what we're trying to do. This is going to be a plan led by local clinicians, commissioners, providers, in order to provide a local solution.
Mr. Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There, of course, are real concerns in the North West generally about deficits and problems in terms of patient care and safety if these deficits continue. But let me ask you a specific question on the issue today. Who will have the final say in these areas? Will it be the commissioners or will it be NHS England? And if it's the commissioners, will they be able to call for more funding, and will the government meet that?
The honourable gentleman should know that this is going to be, the success regime will be coordinated by local commissioners, supported by NHS England, TDA and Monitor, and together they will come together with a plan which will then be implemented. The only way that these success regimes will work is if they are owned by everyone who makes decisions locally.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this announcement. As my honourable friend will know, Basildon Hospital has been making good progress in improving patient care, but that's been at a cost. This regime will allow them not to have to choose between balancing the books and providing a safe environment. But can my honourable friend confirm that patients and the public will be involved at every stage of this process, so that they come along with any changes that may be necessary to achieve the success we're after?
Brendan, they won't just be involved, they will be central to the discussions. I mean, the jeers and jaunts from the opposition front bench give the game away. They expect a decision to be made centrally. That's what they want. That's the only way they think. But what we believe on this side of the House is that it's local people who should be central to that decision, and it should fix the whole local health economy, rather than trying to deal with individual trusts as they come into their own problems.
Yeah. Anna Johnson.
Can the Minister just explain to me how the problem of chief executives who are not performing properly will be dealt with under this regime? And I give you the example under the last coalition government's watch of the chief executive at Hull, who was a disastrous chief executive, but was moved to Harlow, where he's now earning £170,000 a year, had the help of the TDA in that move, leaving a disastrous situation in Hull. How does this help in dealing with those chief executives?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question, and I wasn't aware of that situation. I'd very much like to talk to her about it afterwards, because if that is the case, and if the facts that she has stated are true, then that is indeed wrong. The whole point about this success regime is to get away from the idea where we've got challenged local health economies, where you can change one chief executive in one provider or one commissioner and expect to see a change through the whole system. What we're trying to see here is the system corrected so that local care for local people is improved.
Johnny Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If this intervention improves healthcare for my constituents, then I welcome it very much. But can my honourable friend clarify the impact of this intervention on Derriford Hospital in my constituency, and whether or not the intervention puts any new management into our hospital?
Yeah.
I thank my honourable friend and welcome him to his seat. To repeat the answer I have given several times so far, well, the opposition front bench say he doesn't know. I have to explain to them once again that this is not about a minister sitting in Whitehall making a decision, having never visited an area, just as he did with my constituency and other places in Suffolk when he was a minister, trying to destroy local services. This is different. This is about trying to fix problems which in some places have been problematic, not for months or for years, but for decades. There have been problems in these challenged local health economies, and what we're trying to ensure is that the decisions are corrected and made by local commissioners who actually make the decision, and clinicians.
He'll never... Abbott.
the question of success regime, ministers will be aware of the plight of the Barts NHS Trust, which is in special measures, and part of its problem is the weight of its PFI, a new Labour policy which I did not support. Barts is having to pay back the interest of the PFI at £500,000 a month. Surely a success regime for Barts and other hospitals burdened with the PFI debt would be a serious attempt to renegotiate those PFI agreements.
Well, I'm so glad to hear the Honourable Lady welcome the success regime and the potential that it may have. I spoke to one of her colleagues the other day about the troubled hospitals that she has mentioned, and I was just about to invite her in to have a discussion about them, because we have to try and find out what the core issues are with the Barts NHS Trust. But she did raise an interesting point about PFI. One of the reasons why we are struggling in some cases, and have done over the last 5 years, to provide the funding within the NHS that the NHS requires is because of the enormous NHS debt, which has been the PFI debt, which was loaded onto the NHS by the previous government, which has cost billions of pounds to the NHS over the last 10 years.
Colville.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank my honourable friend for his very thoughtful comments and replies that he has made. But does he recognise as well, though, that the problem, one of the problems that the Devon CCG actually faces is it consists of a very big rural community, but also at the same time one which has got a large urban conurbation of former Plymouth, which is the largest urban conurbation west of Bristol, and that actually we need to find a way of how we can make sure all of this can work so that the city of Plymouth actually gets looked after as far as levels of deprivation and things like that too.
Well, my honourable friend makes the point better than I did, which is how do we actually sort these problems with the local knowledge that he's just demonstrated, rather than a minister in Whitehall with a map thinking that he or she could make the decision themselves. It is precisely that local knowledge and the local solutions to that which the success regime seeks to harness.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is simply not acceptable that an announcement of this magnitude should not have been made first and debated in this House. The success regime, as I understand it, applies to a number of areas of the country, not London. My local hospital, King's College Hospital, has a deficit well in excess of £40 million. It is nigh on impossible to see a GP in parts of the constituency when you need it. We have a crisis in our NHS across the country, and I would like to know from the Minister what is the comprehensive plan to address that crisis, not a piecemeal intervention only in parts of the country.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady and welcome her to her seat. She will not know that there was an adjournment debate at the end of the last Parliament precisely on this issue, and I would invite her to do the same if she wishes to discuss those local issues with me or with other ministers. But as to the issue of the success regime itself, it has been drawn up and devised by Simon Stevens and NHS England, a clinically led organisation fulfilling our desire to see the NHS led by doctors and not by Whitehall bureaucrats.
Will Quince.
I very much welcome the announcement today. Colchester General Hospital is in special measures. One of the biggest issues facing our hospital is the recruitment of nursing staff. Will my honourable friend give an assurance that the recruitment of nursing staff on a county-wide basis will be included as part of the success regime?
Every single aspect that is troubling local health economies, including recruitment, I understand, will be within the scope of success regimes.
Bill Esterson.
Listening to the Minister's previous answers, it seems to me that patients have every right to be worried about whether care is safe in the NHS. But doesn't he realise that unless the government reverses the cuts in social care, the problems in patient care are just not going to be resolved anywhere in the NHS, not just in the areas covered by the so-called success regime?
Could I just gently remind the honourable gentleman that this government and its predecessor changed the culture of trying to suppress bad news, whether it be on care or money, instead trying to understand what is best for patients, even when that means facing up to difficult decisions. And that is precisely what NHS England is doing with the success regime, and that is why we are addressing seriously challenged local health economies, rather than pretending that there isn't a problem, which I'm afraid was the attitude of his front bench spokesman when he was in power.
Order. I must say it's a pleasure to welcome back into the House the Right Honourable Learned Gentleman, the member for Rushcliffe, who, when he celebrates 45 years in the House next month, will, I think, be approaching the midpoint of his parliamentary career. Mr. Kenneth Clark.
Yes, at this crucial midpoint, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, indeed, for that unusual way of calling me, but for which I'm very grateful. Will my honourable friend recall that the whole purpose of introducing the purchaser-provider divide many years ago, which was developed by the Labour Party and is now local commissioning, was to concentrate on patient care, patient outcomes and local priorities. Would he, therefore, with this very welcome announcement, continue to stick by NHS England and allow them to do that and resist the blandishments of the shadow health secretary, who nowadays seems to pine for the days of centralised bureaucracy and is still feebly trying to weaponise the NHS for party political purposes?
Well, it gives me particular pleasure to respond to my right honourable learned friend. He was an exceptional Secretary of State for Health, and he was so because he understood the centrality of local decisions by patients and by their doctors and commissioners. I can confirm we will continue to allow local commissioners to make these decisions rather than trying to wrest power back from them to Whitehall, which is precisely what the Shadow Secretary of State did when he was in this position on this side of the House.
Melanie On.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Isn't the fact that these drastic steps have been taken a sign that care problems are becoming more likely under this government and not less?
Well, I welcome the honourable lady to her seat in the House. I only hope she doesn't have the same contempt for her constituents that her predecessor seems to have had in his comments. I do think it is interesting how they all come out afterwards, isn't it? I will repeat to her again that these decisions will be made locally by local people, local commissioners, in response to local problems. And where they arise, we will seek to address them.
Ellen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard that trusts around my constituency of Faversham and Mid-Kent were potential candidates for this regime. Will the Minister please advise that, unlike some previous oversight regimes, this proposal enables local healthcare organisations to work together to solve their problems and involves not just scrutiny but more support?
Well, I thank my honourable friend particularly for her question, and I'm delighted to see her in her seat. She has an experience and expertise in this area, and she will also know that elsewhere in the country before 2010, often there were good solutions provided by local commissioners, doctors and providers, and then strategic health authorities would come in with a completely different answer and override all of them. That is what we're seeking to avoid on this occasion.
Mr. David Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister was right when he said that patients are the key to this, but also key are the people who deliver hands-on services. He's mentioned a number of times about the role of clinicians. What about the voice of people like care workers, nurses, other people at the front line? Will they be listened to? Will their representative bodies, trade unions, colleges, etc. be listened to? Or, as was the case with the Reform Bill, will they be completely and utterly ignored?
I'm very glad that the honourable gentleman has raised this. This success regime will not work unless every single part of the local health economy contributes, and that must include the vital component of local care workers.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
The early stage of this question and answer would have been better, perhaps, if the opposition had asked how the government was going to respond to the deficiencies shown by the Care Quality Commission report. And can I recommend that we all look at the article in The Guardian today by Diane Taylor and Dennis Campbell, spelling out problems which are being tackled by this. Can I say to my honourable friend that will he make sure that those areas like coastal West Sussex, where there aren't major problems, are not overlooked, they get given support, and that resources don't get taken away from them because they're actually under-resourced, as others are?
Well, this is not about moving resources around the country. And I have to say that I differ from him on his views on the CQC, which had been a complete basket case when this government came to power in 2010, but has been turned round and is now providing quite exceptional inspection regimes, which is changing the whole nature of the safety of quality around the NHS, and that is something I hope will continue and improve.
Geraint Davis.
The Minister said there are systemic issues in Devon, systemic issues in Cumbria, systemic issues in Essex. Did the NAO confirm this, and did he know this before the election? And why didn't he reveal his hand then to say he was going to intervene in one or more of these areas? Or is he simply playing politics with patients' lives?
Well, the honourable gentleman should know that there have been issues in these areas, not just for months or years, but sometimes for decades. And we have sought in the first instance to deal with problems with providers. That's why in 2 of these areas we've got hospitals in special measures or formerly in special measures. And what we're seeking to do now is to fix the problems in the wider local health economy, led by local people. We're actually getting on with it rather than talking about it, which is what happened before.
David Nuttall.
Mr. Speaker, if the success regime is extended to other parts of the country, can the Minister say how this will impact on the proposed devolution of healthcare to Greater Manchester?
I don't anticipate at this stage, and I've not had any indication from NHS England that the success regime will be extended in any way, but this, to repeat, is a particular intervention by local people in coordination with NHS bodies to fix local NHS problems. And when they arise, if they do arise elsewhere in the country, I'm sure that local people might want to look at that too.
Karen Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I congratulate the Minister on what is possibly the fastest reorganisation the NHS has ever seen? And can I ask him which of those local organisations are in charge, who will be accountable for the decision on what constitutes success?
I welcome the Honourable Lady to her seat, and I should say that we are now repeating discussions that we had in the previous government, where I'm afraid the Labour Party still does not understand that these decisions are not being directed from Whitehall. I know that is uncomfortable for them, because what they want to do is pull a lever and hope that something happens at the other end, but it doesn't work. The only way you get success is by local clinicians supported by national bodies providing the solutions that local people deserve.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Chair. We had a problem at Kettering Hospital with the A&E department, and the local commissioners, the hospital, the 3 honourable members, my honourable friend for Kettering and my honourable friend for Corby, all worked together to produce a plan that the Minister of Health has taken up. So that is a precursor to the success regime. That is showing that local commissioners and local hospitals and MPs working together can solve problems. And will the Minister continue to look favourably on that problem?
Well, the care of my honourable friend's constituents, including Mrs. Bone, is one of my prime considerations. And what I would like to say is that he has shown what the shadow front bench should understand, which is that by working across parties, as he did in his part of the world, you're able to bring about success and coordination. I only wish that the shadow front bench, in what should be a clean slate, actually did the same.
Tania Mathias.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Might I ask the Minister if this success regime is a 21st century way of improving the NHS? If so, can I ask him to always look into improving the NHS, which has to be constantly moving and improving for the sake of every patient? And would he, like the Secretary of State, visit my hospital in my constituency, Teddington Memorial Hospital, where a local initiative has vastly improved our out-of-hours service?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady. I welcome her to her seat. And I hope to make a whole series of visits soon, and I will certainly talk to her about her hospital. She will have noted that the very first speech given by my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, was on the NHS. It reaffirms our commitment to the NHS. That is why we were the only major party to commit to the NHS's own plan to its success in the next 5 years. And that is why this party, to be frank, can only now be called the party of the NHS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could my honourable friend confirm that at the heart of...
Honourable gentleman to be heard. Mr. Lefroy.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Could my honourable friend confirm that at the heart of the success regime will be the provisions of the Health and Social Care Safety and Quality Act 2015 regarding integration and regarding quality?
Well, it must have been a great pleasure for the honourable gentleman, my friend the honourable gentleman, to have taken personal possession of the Act, which he helped steer through Parliament and piloted himself. And it's a significant contribution to the cause of patient safety, something which lies at the heart of this government's vision for the NHS.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
Can I congratulate my honourable friend for his obvious grip on very complex material and ask him the extent to which the success regime will take account of Kate Barker's report on health and social care, recently published by the King's Fund?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, my right honourable friend, for his kind comments. The success regime is locally based, but it must take into account the developing national opinion on the integration of health and social care. But that can only be properly integrated if it's based on local considerations. It's not something we can design from the centre, as some would wish.
Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for confirming that the Health and Social Care Safety and Quality Act will be at the forefront of the minds of those implementing these plans. That was an act which was passed by this Parliament in the very last days passed by this House in the very last days of the last Parliament. Doesn't the fact that the opposition have raised this question today show that they have already forgotten the importance and the central tenet of that Act, which was patient care and safety, will be at the forefront of everything this government does and agrees to?
Well, I repeat to my honourable friend the observation I made, that it is interesting that in his opening statement, not one single statement or paragraph about patients and their centrality to what we're trying to do. And the issue is that the NHS has devised its own plan for its own success over the next 5 years, at which safety and care of patients lies at the heart. There is only one party which is supporting that plan, and that is why this party is the only party which is backing the NHS.
Mr. Philip Hollowbone.
I congratulate my honourable friend for his response to the urgent statement and congratulate the new government on acting so swiftly. Having listened to the exchanges today across the floor of the House, it would seem to me particularly sensible and grown up for Her Majesty's Government, A, to admit there are geographic parts of our NHS which aren't working as well as they might, and B, to seek local holistic solutions to put them right as soon as possible.
As so often, my honourable friend is on the money. He's described exactly what NHS England is trying to achieve with the success regime.
Mr. David Morris.
Mr. Speaker, my knee's giving way. May I ask my honourable friend if he would like to come to Morecambe Bay to see an excellent initiative by Dr Alex Gore, Better Care Together, how it's enacted as a pointer forward on this success regime. And also, may I also say that the NHS is always in crisis, according to Labour, but they never actually say what from, unless it's hospital closures that don't exist.
Well, I thank my honourable friend, who has a particular local experience of a failing hospital, and I welcome him back to his seat. I will be coming, I hope, at some point soon to Morecambe Bay, and I will look forward to seeing the local initiatives that he mentions with him.
Order. Point of order, Mr. Andy Burnham.
Mr. Speaker, I apologise for testing your patience. I would not have done so were it not to be an important matter. During this exchange, news has reached me that the Secretary of State is in Liverpool announcing the scrapping of the 18-week target, presumably because they know they can no longer meet it. I wasn't in business questions, but I am led to believe that the Leader of the House said at business questions that ministers should always make major announcements to this House, and indeed he had reminded them of their duty to do this. What advice could you give me about making sure that this edict sticks? And also, before he leaves his place, shouldn't the Minister confirm to this House whether or not the 18-week target is indeed to be scrapped?
Order. 3 points. First of all, the right honourable gentleman has expressed his own concern forcefully in his own way, and it's on the record. Secondly, it would not be appropriate to ask the Minister to respond, because we can't have interrogation through point of order and the continuation of debate. And thirdly, if I can reassure the right honourable gentleman on one point, he hasn't missed anything said on this matter at today's business questions, for the very simple reason that business question is about to happen. So the right honourable gentleman was perhaps ahead of himself, but he's made his point and it's on the record, and we will now proceed.